The development capacity onshore, it's relatively small because those applications are largely developed at the region and the globe. And that's increasingly a sort of focus that Citi is to leverage our scale and really to leverage core banking applications as much as possible. So in the past, where we did have local applications, over a period of time, in many cases we've been retiring those applications. In the consumer space, we're moving to an integrated core banking platform. It's similar to the presentations you see from CBA, for example, in terms of a core banking refresh. And we're doing that with a global solution. Internally, that's branded as Rainbow. It's a suite of applications. In Australia, we'll be moving on to that suite. And so our target is, at that point, to really be fully leveraging regional systems. Most of our applications are actually hosted in the region. And so regionally, we have our strategic data centers in Singapore and in Hong Kong. And our core applications are basically hosted from those locations. Essentially what we have onshore is either here because of some connectivity reason, whether it's a third party or whether it's latency to the exchange, or whether it's latency to a customer, a consumer customer. So for example, the internet-facing interfaces sit locally purely from a latency perspective. But basically the data center footprint in Australia is quite small. We don't have a strategic data center in Australia. It's really communications rooms more than a full-scale data center. We've had this set up for quite a number of years and have had many discussions with the regulators. Their main concern is really that we own end-to-end the control of that data, not necessarily physically where it's hosted. Now, of course, with the new privacy law, there's some nuances with that, but in general, there isn't really a restriction on physically where the data is hosted. I think the regulator would be more concerned if I said to them, look, but I'm not responsible because it's offshore. So long as I'm responsible and I can show that end-to-end responsibility, then I think they're reasonably comfortable. We're moving from gathering business requirements, turning them into technology, functional specifications and requirements, and then development, but rather saying that we've got a suite of a product that will anyway upgrade each quarter based on requirements from many countries. And our key goal is how do we leverage it? And so the key goal for my technology team is they've got to become the expert users. As I say, the sort of genius bar analogy of the Apple Store. And that's mainly on the consumer side. It's how do they become that type of individual? It's the advocate for the system. One of the goals I have from the business this year, which I think is a little bit different from a CIO in the past, is as well as the goals around delivering the system, which kind of obviously are there, but I have a specific goal around leveraging the system. And I think that's unusual because that's not about deploying code, deploying infrastructure, deploying applications. That's about, given the fact that we're doing a deployment, how can the business make the most of it? And so it's a revenue goal. How much revenue can I generate from the application? And I think that's a relatively unique structure. It's relatively a new thing for me and relatively new at Citi. It's a big cultural challenge. It's the most complex of cultural challenges going, and I think it would apply to every bank and many other organizations too, that historically you're designed to take in business requirements that the business would feel are kind of unique to them, or inspirational ideas that the business has come up. You do some element of prioritization, some element of financial analysis, and then you would develop some subset of those requests. And that whole process around demand management of business requirements is very different from you're going to get a release of a product. Yes, of course, you get some element of being part of a group that puts in requirements, but you're part of a global group that puts in requirements. And that 90% of what you achieve with the system will be based on what other people put in as requirements that you just get. I think the country that will succeed the most with our platform is the country that might put almost no requirements in, but actually spends exactly the resources they would have done on that purely based on leveraging, except of course where we've got compliance requirements or regulatory requirements that are kind of mandatory.